know that the students are behind. We know that just about every student in our district is not where they need to be academically. So we're going to use this time to for instruction rather than assessment. So hopefully your teachers will take advantage of that. So for that reason, we have taken the tests out of Eduphoria as well. So they're not available in there either. So we are asking all campuses to not give the test at this time. All right. Before we get started with the presentation on STAAR, there was a interview that Commissioner Morath was a part of. This happened, I think it was about 2 weeks ago or so. Actually, it was exactly 2 weeks ago because it was the day that we were out for the first ice storm on the 11th. And I was being bombarded with emails and texts. Did you hear what the commissioner said? Now, what people repeat and what is sometimes printed in the paper and what's put on social media is not exactly what people said. And I'm sure you are aware of that. The truth doesn't always come out exactly the same. So what people were saying was that virtual students didn't have to test. Well, that's not exactly what the commissioner said. And so I wanted you to hear it straight from the commissioner. So we're going to, now this interview is about 37 minutes long, I believe. We took about a 3-minute piece out of it. If you want to watch the entire video or listen to the entire interview, you're more than welcome to do so. We have put a link on our website for you to do so at a later date. But I wanted to isolate this about 3.5 minutes or so because I think that relates directly what we just talked about. So we'll go ahead and cue it up and then talk about it after. We can't hear it, Debbie.
Below what they might have otherwise been. You're using this as a benchmarking tool this year, Commissioner, even though you know that the results on the STAAR test are going to be far below what they might have otherwise been. You're using this as a way to benchmark against the previous year so you understand, as you've said, the degree of learning loss that you have to recover from.
Absolutely. Right? And I'll put it in very personal terms. I mean, I'm a parent as well as a commissioner. My kids are in public school. And my wife and I are now having active conversations about our daughter and whether or not it makes sense to have her repeat the grade level.
Yeah.
Now we get report cards back from the teachers. We talk to parent-teacher conferences, but I want to know summatively where she falls on that spectrum of expectations. This is a key piece of information that I would use to sort of that my wife and I would use to support our child. Like this is, I think it's critical information for educators and supporting kids, and for parents.
So you're making that choice. You and Mrs. Morath are making that choice for your kid. That's what works right for you. There is a move. If you're going to have a STAAR test, there is a move that you know. Diego Bernal, the former vice chair of the Public Education Committee, Democratic state lawmaker from San Antonio, and essentially half the legislature wrote you a letter earlier this week, bipartisan list of legislators, asking that you give families an opportunity to opt out of the test. Don't have to explain why, but if they believe that their circumstances mean that it would be better for their kid, their family, for the kid to opt out this year, that would be their personal choice, in the same way that you and Mrs. Morath are making your personal choice potentially to have your kid repeat a grade level, given the unusual nature of this circumstance. They have requested that. And Representative Bernal's quote was, the idea of forcing students to go in to take a test that doesn't count, since the STAAR test is not going to count for the A through F ratings this year, is unnecessary. Will you grant them that request to give families and students an opt-out on this test?
So I think some of the nature of the request stems from people actually not understanding all the adjustments that have been made this year. I think the essence of the question comes down to on-campus instruction. We know that the best place for kids to be to learn, for the vast majority of kids, is to be on campus. And we've set the policy landscape up so that we can maximize the number of kids that are on campus. So for kids who are coming in on campus, as we get into the spring, because I mean, STAAR test doesn't roll around until April generally. There's a few exceptions to that. Yep. That you're on campus, you'll take the STAAR test like you would any other year, and then you'll have access to that information. For families who are still at that point concerned about the public health issues, School districts are able to make a variety of adjustments to ensure that they have access to a safe on-campus testing environment, or a safe proctored campus testing environment. So if a family wants to then on that day, since they're otherwise remote, if they want to send their kid in that day to get tested, they can. But if the family is still concerned that they want and that they need to remain from remote instruction, then they stay remote instruction that day.
But they're going to still take
their kid won't take the test, and they won't have access to that information. So I mean, there'll be a significant reduction in their ability to like know where their children are. But
right. But to be clear, you're saying that if they decide after all the things you're willing to provide them as alternatives, if you are willing, if they do not want to come back in and do the test and they don't want to do it remotely, you will give them the option to opt out of it.
It's not opting out of STAAR tests. It's opting for remote instruction. So they will continue experiencing remote instruction. We don't have the logistical ability to do the STAAR remotely.
Okay, so as I said before, that's only a small little piece of a 37-minute interview or so. It might even be longer. I'm not even sure. But I wanted to make sure that you heard it again straight from Commissioner Morath's mouth. What he actually said is not exactly what was printed in the paper. So I want to make sure that we all understand that first, because we're at the first line of defense when it comes to administering the test. We want to make sure that we're not giving the wrong information. So as he said, there's no opt-out for STAAR. There never has been. I know people have liked to throw that word around before. We're opting out of STAAR. It's never existed, and it doesn't exist this year. So I just wanted to, again, to make sure that you understood what he was saying, that that each campus should make every effort to make adjustments to test those virtual learners. So again, like he said, if they don't show up, they don't show up. And we have a code for that, and we'll talk more about that in our presentation. But we certainly cannot discourage students, just like we can't discourage a student from coming to school under normal circumstances. That would fall under the category of serious irregularity. And we know what the repercussions of serious irregularities are, of course. But fraudulently exempting a student from testing is considered a serious irregularity. So you cannot encourage students that they stay home if they're a virtual student, if the parent wants to send them to test, or if they make the choice on their own. Now, for high school, it's a little bit different because they do have graduation requirements still in place. Those graduation requirements are still going to be in place. Those are not going to change just because he said in an interview that, virtual students didn't show up, they didn't have to take the test. So with all that being said, everything pretty much remains the same. If you're looking for a memo from TEA, if you go on the website and you say, I want to see this memo from TEA that says what Morath just said, you're not going to find it because it doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because TEA never wrote a memo. This was simply something he said in an interview, and it was something we already had in place anyway. He wasn't saying anything new. He was just reiterating what TEA had already put in place. So again, I wanted to make sure that we all understood that very clearly, that remote students are still to be tested if they come to school. We cannot discourage them from not coming to school. All right, let's go ahead and start, Debbie. All right, I think I mentioned some of these already, but if you came in late, make sure that you mute your microphone, stay active, stay engaged, keep your camera on. All questions should go in the chat, and we will answer those questions in the Q&A section. And this is being recorded so you can watch it at a later time. Also, all of the information that we give you today, from the PowerPoint to all the forms, will be posted in the Learning Pathway site.
We know that it's really difficult to pay attention in training. So we are asking that you put one suggestion in the chat, just real quickly, about how you get yourself mentally prepared for training. And then how do you get your staff mentally prepared so that they can pay attention during training? So if you could just drop some ideas in the chat. I see a lot of people that are offering food. Can we offer some food for our training?
I can offer that they eat their virtual candy bar if they'd like while they're watching this training.
And I see a lot of people that are asking that you be a little bit more humorous.
Well, like I told the elementary group this morning, I'm not very funny. I don't know how to tell jokes very well. So aside from being funny looking, I think we're out on the funny as well. I'm being very helpful, I know. All right, well, let's continue with the presentation. So today we'll talk about STAR. That's what you're here for. We're also going to do STAR Alt, but that'll come at the end. All right, so today's learning outcomes is we're going to talk about STAR procedures and guidelines. We'll talk about some forms. We'll talk about accommodations. And then, of course, we always embed some security measures into all of their presentations. We realize that you've already presented your security presentation to your staff, but we still embed a little bit of security in every presentation that we do. All right, so here we have our administration dates. First of all, on April 6th, that is the day for grade 7 writing and for English 1. This can be either paper or online, either one. And then on April 8th, which is the Thursday, that is the day we will administer English 2. And again, that can be done either paper or online. And then by April 9th, we're going to make sure that we get as many makeups done as possible, again, both paper and online. Moving to the following weeks. If you've looked at the calendar at all, you'll notice that there are dates that go all the way from April 13th all the way down to May 6th for makeups online. So April 13th would be a day for 7th grade writing and English 1. And you'll notice that for each one of these weeks, Tuesdays are the days for 7th grade writing and English 1, and then Thursdays will be the day for English 2. And you'll see that appear all the way through the entire window, because remember, this window is 5 weeks now. So any student who has not completed the assessment, who didn't complete the assessment in the first week, we will continue to try to get them tested in subsequent weeks. So at your week 1 check-in, when you come to check in, you will have to identify how many potential testers you will have for weeks 2 through 5. So you're going to submit a roster to us, not only your master roster, this will be a separate roster of how many testers you could potentially have. And that's for weeks 2 through 5. Your paperwork for weeks 2 through 5, that can be submitted electronically at the end of the testing window, but you will still have to submit a hard copy roster of your potential testers for weeks 2 through 5. All right, so for remote instruction students, as we talked about earlier, so we want to ensure equity for all students. So student must be present in a monitored test session and must be supervised by a trained certified test administrator in order to participate in the assessment program. For any eligible student who's receiving remote instruction who does not come to campus to take the STAR, the district will code them as O, and then we will code them as a 0 in column D of the agency use field. So for those are the students we just finished discussing. They may be remote students, but they chose, or their parents chose, never to send them to school and take the test. They would get an O with a 0. We'll talk more about that later. So as you know, makeups are available for all grades and subjects. We're limited on the subjects, of course, this time because we're just doing writing and English. But for later on, just for your knowledge, they are available. Makeups are available for all grades and subjects. If a paper tester does not attend school during the first week of the test, then we're going to mark that student absent. So if you had plans for a student to take a paper test, and for whatever reason, whether they were home with COVID or they just didn't come to school that first week, you will still submit a paper answer document for them with a score code of A. When they return to school at a later date, you will then give them a makeup test online, and they will take the online test. Whatever we mark on the online test will replace the A that we submitted on the answer document. So there's no worry about them having two documents out there. If the online tester does not complete the test will be marked absent in the online system, but that won't be done until week 5 of the window. So we have to wait until the very end. And all absences and paperwork should be submitted no later than May. We put May 4th, Debbie, but I think it's May 6th for secondary. So we'll have to change that date. We'll change that date when we post the PowerPoint. That should be May 6th because May 6th is the last day for English 2 online. Is this a repeat slide?
No, it's if they get ill while they're taking the test.
Okay. So if a student becomes ill while they're taking the test, of course, they will be allowed to do a makeup. This is new. What was it, 2 years ago, I believe it was, when they implemented this rule, where if a student, in the past, when a student got ill, we would mark them with a score code of O. That's a little bit different now. We can allow the student to do a makeup at a later date. And of course, you will contact us for any guidance. Along with what we just talked about, what you're seeing here is a screenshot of the STAAR EOC Algebra 1 test. If an online tester becomes ill and can't finish, the STAAR online platform will actually lock down, and it won't let them go back and change any answers that they answered on the previous day. So that's why it's now allowable, at least on the online version, although it's allowable on both paper and online. But it allows the student to, or excuse me, it doesn't allow the student to go back and change their answers. So all they're seeing is new content. All right, let's talk about manuals. As always, this training does not take place of reading the manuals. That includes the test administrator manuals and the DCCR. So you as the test coordinator, make sure that you're very familiar with all of those, with everything that's contained in all of those manuals. So this year, unfortunately, we have a lot of errors. I don't know what the reason is, but we have a lot of errors in the manuals. So TEA has put out corrections for the manuals. These corrections are posted and will be sent to you in a PDF. Here's a list of all of the corrections that were made, and you will get a copy of this, so you don't have to write all of this down, but you can see that there's quite a few errors in the manuals that need to be corrected. So for grades 6 through 8, the test administrator manual has incorrect information in the online administrator directions. And you can see there that the error occurs on page 66. So we tell you all this to also tell you to make sure that you make copies of all of those PDFs that you receive from us that have the corrections. When you pass out your manuals prior to training, make sure that you've also given your teachers the pages with the manual corrections and that they cross out any incorrect sections in the booklets and they refer to the PDF that you've given them separate. So again, you're going to distribute your manuals early enough to allow the teacher sufficient time to review those manuals and review the errors that are in the manuals and correct those. Test administrator manuals are designed to support test administration activities, so they should be used at all times. You should use the manual during your training session. Encourage your teachers to bring their manuals with them. And then remind test administrators that manuals should be retained because you're going to use them for the entire calendar year. They're not just for one administration and then we toss them. You have to use them the entire year. Also make sure that you have extra manuals on hand and that you remind your teachers if they happen to forget their manual, please don't be afraid to ask for one. We know it'll probably happen. It happens just about every year. Some teachers say, well, I was afraid to ask my coordinator for a manual because I thought they'd be upset. That's why I didn't use a manual. Well, the manuals have to be used. No one has these directions memorized, trust me. Test administrators should use their manuals on test day. The manual should be visible and easy accessible throughout the day. The test should be administered in strict accordance with the manuals, and those say directions must be stated verbatim. So again, we're not doing it from memory. We're reading directly out of the book. And then, of course, the online administration directions, there's a section in the manual for that needs to be read prior to a student doing an online session. This is just a reminder for EL students that they are allowed to ask for additional help in understanding any of the directions that are read, whether it means reading them again or clarifying the directions. And this applies to not only the directions at the beginning of the test, but also in the directions at the beginning of a section of a test. All right, so here we have the training attendance log. So you are going to redeliver this training. You're going to train all of your test administrators, your relief test administrators, your campus administrators, paraprofessionals, any hallway monitor or bathroom monitor you're going to use, any additional staff that you may have, and then extra help staff if you have any extra help staff at your campus. I know we have some extra help staff throughout the district helping currently, covering classes and things like that, so they can certainly be used for testing as well. Make sure that you use a training attendance log for every single session that you do, that you deliver. This is for your protection. This is to ensure that you have trained all of your test administrators, so they can't come back and say, well, you didn't tell me. Test administrators should be trained in security. I trust that everyone has done their security training by now. They must be trained in the test administration specific, which is what we're doing now. They should be a certified person if they're going to administer. Non-certified people are, of course, be trained and they'll do other jobs. They must be employed by the district. They must sign an oath. And no more than 30 students in a room. And of course, in the situation we're in now, you probably won't have a classroom with that many kids. Campus coordinators are also required to provide additional training to any test administrator who's going to give a test with designated supports, or if they're doing an online test, if they're doing an oral administration, or if they're doing any kind of transcription. And include signed, and I think we have Braille at secondary. We do have one student at elementary. All right, this list, I'm not going to go over every single bullet. You will receive a copy of this. We have been asked by several test coordinators, mainly the new ones, to give them more information on what they could add to their PowerPoint when they present it to their staff. What kinds of things should I be telling my teachers in addition to the regular stuff that the state says I have to tell them? So we kind of put together a small little checklist for you. You can use it or not use it. It's really up to you. Like I said, it was mainly intended for new coordinators. And these are other things that you can communicate about logistics. The one that I would definitely recommend you do is communicate to your staff about emergencies for that day. They need to know what to do in case there's an emergency or disturbance of some kind. Oftentimes teachers are left in the dark when it comes to that, and it's going to be real hectic trying to run around and tell people what to do, and usually the intercom doesn't work properly for that. So make sure that everybody knows the plan for the day prior to starting the test. And like I said, you'll get a copy of all of this, a hard copy, so you don't have to write any of this down. All right, so here we have a copy of the oaths. Of course, your oath and the principal's oath is good for the entire year. So you will sign just one, and it'll be on file for the rest of the year. For test administrators, however, they will need one for every single testing window that we have. And those, of course, will be turned in at check-in. All right, so let's talk about campus planning. So we need to consider the ramifications of COVID-19, just like we did when we administered the STAAR EOC in December for high school. I know middle schools are in the room now and they didn't do it, but we need to consider some ramifications for COVID-19, such as we need to train additional test administrators. You as a testing coordinator should select a backup test coordinator and train that person as if they were your backup. If for whatever reason you were to go on quarantine or out for COVID, whatever the case may be, this person is going to have to jump in and take over where you left off. So make sure that you have designated one person that you have trained in case they need to take over. Plan to test virtual students in a separate location from in-person students. So students that are coming to who are virtual right now, who are going to be coming to your campus to test, need to be tested in a separate room from students who are in person. And always plan for backup test administrators. You can never have enough teachers or relief test administrators, because on the day of the test, inevitably, you're going to have some teachers that are out. And then most importantly, please make sure that you communicate your plan to the staff so everybody is well aware of what is going on, who their relief administrator is going to be, and so on. Make sure that we have a plan in place. So as you prepare for the test, of course, you're going to conduct a walkthrough through all of the rooms that are going to be used for testing. And in this case, it may be more rooms because of the situation that we're in of the pandemic. We're probably going to have more small groups than we've ever had before. So make sure that you walk every single room, that you're removing or covering any instructional material. Anything that's a direct source of answers needs to be taken down or covered. That includes hallways, computer labs, extra time rooms. Also make sure that there's enough room in that specific classroom to spread the students out and that they're going to be comfortable during testing. Where are you going to position your hallway monitors, your bathroom monitors? This way they can monitor the students at all times. And then also make a plan about how you're going to move students who need extra time or when it's time to consolidate your students. But always remember that students can never carry their own materials. This includes the answer documents and their test booklets. All right, what you see here is the program certification verification form. This is the pre-printed information that you get on your answer documents sometimes is not accurate. So it's only as accurate as the pre-code file that we submit. In the past, you used to have to put out all of your answer documents and go through using your information that you got from Focus and verify each and every single document. Well, we've made it easier for you now, because we now produce what's called the pre-code variance roster. And what this variance roster does for you is it actually tells you which students have different information in Focus on the day that that report is run versus what was in Focus the day that we submitted the pre-code file. And this can be very helpful. So you don't have to go through every single document. You can just pull up your errors or your differences in this case, and you can fix them right on the document. So if you have any errors in any field, with the exception of name, PEIMS ID, and birth date, you can make those changes right on the document. So if the special ed code is wrong, if their bilingual code is wrong, their ESL code, whatever the case may be, you can correct that on the answer document and move on to the next student. However, if the student's name is spelled incorrectly, or it's the wrong PEIMS ID, or they have the wrong birth date, you will have to void that answer document, and you will have to hand grade a new answer document with the correct information. And then, of course, you're going to complete the form that you see there on your screen, which is called the Demographic and Program Information Verification, and bring a copy to check-in. All right, so let's go on to the master roster. The master roster should include all of your enrolled students who are testing. So for middle school, it'll be just your 7th graders. For high school, it'll be all of your English 1 and English 2 students. So you're going to use that pre-code verification roster that's in Texas Reports to create your master roster. Or high schools, you can do it a different way. I know some of you do it a different way, but however you create it, it needs to have all the fields, and we'll show you those in a minute. Your master roster should also be sorted and numbered. If the number of students on your master roster does not equal your documents, then we need to know why. And they probably won't equal because of online testers, STAR Alt 2 testers, and so on. So here are all the fields that need to be on the master roster. Now, there has been a change this year. This year, we have taken career and technology, so CTE code. It will still appear on your answer document, but we don't need to check it anymore, nor does it need to be on your master roster. And then over on the left, you'll see a link there. This is a link for a micro-learning that my staff developed during the summer that assists you in how to create a master roster. So if you're a new person, you're not quite sure how to create a master roster, you can go online, watch this YouTube video, and get some resources, and you should be able to do it no problem. You're also going to prepare test room rosters for all of your students. So your test room roster can be created from your master roster. You just filter down and print that off. But your test room roster should include the room number, the test administrator's name, students' names, last, first, middle initial, their 9-digit PIEMS ID, their birth date, their race, ethnicity, and of course, their enrolled grade level. As I mentioned in a couple screens ago, the CTE code will still appear on the answer document for this year. We're thinking that next year it'll be taken off of the answer document, but for this year, they're still using some answer documents that they already had. So it will still appear there, but beginning this year, the career and technology code or indicator will be collected via the PIEMS submission rather than through the STAAR test. So they're still collecting it. We're just doing it a different way. So there's no need for us to mark it on the answer document. All right. So as you organize your test sessions, remember that you can group students across grade levels and programs and subjects. Again, for this particular administration, we're just testing one subject, so it doesn't really come into play, but later on it certainly will. So what that means is you can actually group kids that are taking different tests, different subjects, different grades. It doesn't matter. As long as their directions are read separately, they can all test in the same room. And then a student who uses a certain accommodation that could be distracting to other students, let's make sure that we put them either in a small group administration or even an individual administration to eliminate that distraction. And then organize your test session in a way that keeps students from being confused if you have multiple administrations in the room. So make sure that your teachers are reading the directions to the correct students if you have a mixed batch in there. All right, we're also going to ensure that a proper testing environment. Staff should take the necessary steps to prevent students from seeing each other's monitors. So we're talking about online testing. On the day of testing or before the day of testing, staff should verify computers to make sure that they're ready to go. Don't want to wait until the day of. You want to make sure you do that before. Ensure that students have a pair of headphones if they're doing online testing. And then no element of the testing room should hinder a student's performance. So it shouldn't be too dark or too hot or too cold, whatever the case may be. All right, this is you see a copy of a test ticket there. Test tickets are a form that teachers will give a student in order for them to log in to an online test. Please keep in mind that these are secure and they have to be distributed to the students individually. The name of the student will appear on the test ticket, so teachers can't just hand these out at random. Sometimes the name is kind of small print. I don't know if TEA has changed that or ETS has changed that, but sometimes the name is really, really hard to read. So make sure that in your training for your online test administrators, you're reminding teachers of this or highlight the student's name, whatever it takes. Their student test tickets contain information about their embedded PMPs or personal needs and preferences. So this is a good way for you to verify that the student has the correct PMPs. If you think back to a few weeks ago, we had the deadline for you to submit your PMPs on the online tool. The PMPs that you submitted there will be populated in the online system. So all you need to do is verify. If you need to change any of the PMPs, you will have to do so individually. So you will have to go into the Texas Assessment Management System and do it student by student. Or if you didn't put any PMPs in, you will have to go in student by student and put those in. Make sure that you've printed your test tickets at least a day before the test administration. You don't want to be doing it the morning of. And also make sure that you keep them in locked storage because they are considered secure. And you will put the number of test tickets checked out to a teacher on the materials control form to ensure that you're giving them the correct number of tickets and that they're bringing back the correct number of tickets. All right, so let's talk about materials. I believe by now everyone has turned in their secure storage certificate. However, if your room where you're storing your materials does change for whatever reason, if you had damage to your school, let's say, due to the storm recently, and you're going to change the room where you store your materials, make sure that you submit a new secure material storage certificate. And you will submit that. You can submit that via email directly to Patricia Hayes here in ADQ. What you see on the screen now is a little screenshot of what was called the materials list. The materials list can be found on the Texas Assessment Management System by going to reports, then orders, and then you select the administration, and it will pull this up. This went active on the 22nd, so this week. And what this does for you is it actually gives you a preview. We used to call it a preview list. It gives you a preview of what you are going to receive from TEA for this particular administration. So you're able to go on there and see, okay, here I'm receiving, if this were an actual administration, I'm getting 208 grade 8 science and social studies books, and I'm getting 8 campus ID sheets and so on. So it gives you kind of a sneak peek of what you're supposed to get, which kind of helps in your planning. So if you don't have enough, you can always order more materials. All right, so if you think back to the first training that we did at the beginning of the year, we talked about this a little bit, but just as a reminder that in 2021, spring of 2021, the state will be using books that are dated both 2021 and 2020. Campuses may receive either or both. Now, TEA did tell us they were going to try to keep one campus to 1 year. So your campus should only receive all 2020 or all 2021. But of course, you know, that's in a perfect world and we don't live in that. So there is a chance that you're going to receive books that are mixed. So keep your eye out for that. Also this year new, form numbers are now 3-digit numbers. They had to put 3-digit number on the 2021 books. And so there is now a 3-digit box on the answer document as well. What they're telling us is that Form 01 and Form 101 are the same, but those are the only two that are the same. So 102 and 02 would not be the same. Once you have picked up your materials, make sure that you verify your shipment. So you're going to grab your shipping notice and you're going to go through and count all of your materials and check them off on your shipping notice. This needs to be done within 24 hours of you receiving your materials. The reason this is so important, because if you're missing something, we need to know right away. You can't wait until check-in or until we start the administration to tell us, hey, I'm missing a pack of 10 or something like that. Make sure that you tell us right up front if you're missing any materials, and you're going to acknowledge this, of course, within 24 hours that, yes, it is correct. I received everything I was supposed to. It doesn't mean it's everything you need. You may need more items, but at least you received everything you were supposed to. If you need more items, then we will ask you to do an additional materials request, and this can be done on our website. So if you go to our website, you will input the materials that you need. This must be done, however, by March 29th. That is the very last day the additional materials request form will be available. We cannot order materials past this. They are no longer doing overnight orders. So any student who doesn't have materials that you needed materials for will have to be put online and test online. So make sure that you get those additional materials early enough. Test administrators that are conducting an oral administration must have a test book with the same form number as the student's book. That hasn't changed. So make sure that you're if you don't have enough form numbers to give an oral administration, plan about how you're going to do that, which in this year may require you separating your groups into smaller groups, unfortunately. And the reason I say that is because we as a district here at the district office, we no longer receive Form 1s. They do not send us Form 1s. The only Form 1s are sent straight to the campus, and that's based on the PMPs that you entered previously, of course, stating that that student was going to receive an oral administration. So those are the only Form 1s that you're going to see. Additional materials, of course, you're going to return your original materials back to the warehouse. That includes additional materials. And then you're going to pick those up at the warehouse, and you're going to pick up any additional materials here at Metro. Once your original material, or excuse me, once your additional materials request is processed, you will be notified. So don't put in your request and then jump in your car and drive down here, because they're probably not going to be ready. Make sure that you wait until you receive an email stating that those materials are ready. And of course, you'll come here to Metro to pick up additional materials. Initial orders get picked up at the warehouse. Come to the back door. For those of you that have never been here, Metro High School, come to the back door. Use your badge to badge in or ring the buzzer. If it's at any point you realize, oh, I ordered additional materials, but I'm not going to need them after all, that's okay. We understand, but please let us know. We need to know so we can put those back in, scan those back into inventory. During checking out your materials and checking in of your materials, you're going to use, of course, the materials control form. The materials control forms come in two versions. There's the old school version where you actually have to write everything out. And there's the iTrack STAAR version where the iTrack STAAR system creates the material control form for you. I don't think there's a whole lot of people that use the old-fashioned form, but if you want to use it, you're certainly welcome to do so. However, I will warn you that if you ever get additional materials that are not in sequence, that is a big pain, because you have to write all 10-digit security code numbers for every single booklet that you issue. So trust me, do it with iTrack STAAR. It's a heck of a lot easier. If you're new and you've never used iTrack STAAR, there is a micro-learning for you to watch. I don't think it's any longer than about 30 minutes. You will probably be an expert after you watch that video one time. Your secure materials must be checked in, out and then back in each day. So teachers cannot keep their materials for any reason. And like I mentioned earlier, you're going to locate and record the 10-digit security number, and that's what it gets put on the materials control form. Or let iTrack STAAR do it for you. The test administrator should verify that you gave them everything that they're signing for. Really, really important. Please have your teachers count their materials in front of you. I know sometimes they're nervous or they want to just get back to their classroom as quickly as possible, and they just grab their bin and go. Make sure that you stop them and say, no, I need you to count them here before you sign, because they have to sign in the outbox for that particular day. Once the test administrator has signed for their materials, they are responsible for those materials until they return them back to you. And make sure that they know that, because if they sign for something and you made a mistake and didn't give them, they were supposed to have 20 books and you only gave them 19, they didn't catch it until later on. That's on them. That's not on you. So all secure materials assigned must be returned at the end of each testing session. And when they return those materials back to you, of course, you as the test coordinator will then count the books back in, along with counting the answer documents, and you will sign in the inbox on the materials control form. And then, of course, you'll keep a copy for your records and make a copy to bring to check-in. Mentioned iTrack STAAR earlier. You're going to review your inventory dashboard on iTrack STAAR to make sure that you have received all of the booklets that you were supposed to. It should match your shipping notice, and it should also match your materials list that's online. You do not have to scan items into inventory. Many years ago, you were required to scan your items when you first got them. That is no longer true. Once you pick up your materials, you're good to go. The materials or the inventory is already in iTrack STAAR. What you will need to do, however, is you may need to add teachers as test administrators into the iTrack STAAR system. The video that I mentioned earlier also walks you through on how to do that. It's very, very easy. That's something you can certainly be working on prior to the materials arriving to make sure that you have all of your teachers already in the system, especially if you have new teachers. Once you have all of your teachers in there and you have your materials, you're then going to scan your books and you're going to assign your books to the teachers as you're putting your bins together. Once you have scanned all of your books out to the teachers, then you can print your materials control form, and voila, it'll have all of the security codes along with the teacher's name and ready for them to pick up their materials. When the teachers return their booklets back to you, you will scan in all of the items, used and unused. And then before check-in, you must also scan any other unused books that you never issued out to anyone. Everything that you're bringing back has to be scanned back in as a returned item. So again, you're going to check your inventory dashboard prior to coming to check-in to make sure that you don't have any missing books, because they're not really missing. They show as missing because they haven't been scanned back into inventory. Let's hope they're not missing anyway. All right, so here's some materials that you're going to need to distribute for students who are taking a paper test. Of course, you're going to need a seating chart along with room rosters. Each student will need 2 number 2 pencils with erasers, 1 test booklet for every student, 1 test booklet for the test administrator, if it's required. So we're talking about perhaps an oral administration here. If the teacher is not doing an oral administration, don't give them any extra books. It typically causes problems when they have more materials than they need. 1 answer document for every student, and then 1 answer document for demonstration purposes for the teacher. And then, of course, for reading and writing, they will have dictionaries. If we have any unusable or defective material, so let's say that a document tears, the student tears it accidentally or erases a hole in it because they were erasing too hard, you're going to simply give them a brand new answer document, make sure that their name is on it, instruct the student to pick up where they left off. They're not to go back and transcribe their own document. That needs to be done by a trained, certified test administrator or by you as the test coordinator. So just have the student pick up wherever they left off and then ensure them that you will transfer their answers at a later date. The test administrator should obtain a new answer document. Again, I just said that, and instruct them to begin where they left off. And then once testing is over, you or a teacher will transcribe. If you have a defective booklet for whatever reason, and we went years and years and years without any mistakes in books, and then we had like 2 years in a row where we had mistakes. So it can happen. The latest one was we actually had a 5th grade math STAAR book. It was like Form 21. It literally had 2 blank pages in the middle of the test. And so it skipped over about, 5 or so questions. So that's definitely a defect. So that needs to be reported to us. Never look in the book. Just give the student another book if you have the same form number. If you don't have the same form number, call us and we will try to get you the same form number. If we don't have it either, then we'll call TEA and they will tell us what to do at that point. All right. So test administration, talking about start and stop times. Of course, our tests are 4 hours with the exception of ELA. ELA is 5 hours. So Debbie, could you add that with a little note? I'm sure everybody knows that, but we want to add it to the PowerPoint to be accurate. 4 hours for all tests with the exception of English 1 and English 2, which is 5 hours. They must complete within the same school day. Teachers should have a clock or a timer so they can monitor how much time. They should be recording times on the seating chart, and the time does not start until after the directions have been read. So the directions are not part of the test. Here's our little script that we have. You would tell students every hour how much time they have left. In the final hour, we're going to remind students a little bit more frequently at 45, at 30, 20, and 10 minutes. And then finally, when time is up, you tell students to put their pencils down, and that is the end of the test. That doesn't mean that's when they can start bubbling on the answer document. That is the end of the test. They should have already bubbled their answers by that point. That's where active monitoring comes into play. For late arriving students, this is really important on ELA days because the test is 5 hours. So we have to make sure, for those of you administering English 1 and English 2, and for 7th grade writing for that matter, 4 hours. But if there's not 4 or 5 hours left in the day, you're going to have to administer that test as a makeup. Even though we may know that student's not going to take 4 hours, we still have to give them the full allotted time. Students who begin testing after others have already started, of course, will have a different stop time. So as teachers are reminding them of how much time they have left, make sure that they are reminded separately so they are kept aware of how much time they have left. Breaks are allowed. However, some breaks are included in the time limit. So in other words, the clock doesn't stop, and that includes water breaks, restroom breaks, snack breaks, or a short or physical or mental break. Where we do stop the clock would be as if we had a planned lunch, if we're moving students from one area to another, or if you had a student who perhaps had an extended break because they had to go to the nurse. If we have any of those situations, then yes, we will stop the clock. During breaks, students are not to discuss the test, so they should be monitored during lunchtime, and test booklets should be closed with the answer documents inside, and then the teacher can either collect them if it's an extended break that we're leaving the room. What you see here is the record of student time testing form. This is used for students who have a different time than the rest of the class. So for the class as a whole, we'll monitor the start and stop on the seating chart. But for individual students who are perhaps late arriving or they have a medical break, we will monitor their times on this separate sheet. We talked about seating charts earlier. Every single room must have a seating chart, whether it's a paper pencil room or if it's an online administration. They all have to have seating charts. The seating charts should include the names of the students who are in the room, the location of each student, the names of all the test administrators. That includes relief test administrators. And of course, we talked about the session times being listed on that as well, along with the time to test. A test administrator should record the seating information for late arriving students, as we mentioned earlier. Seating charts must include that start and stop time for every test session. And you as the test coordinator, along with the principal, should be actively monitoring. As you're actively monitoring, you will go in and initial the seating chart a minimum of 1 time. If you want to initial it each time you go in, that's fine, but you have to do it at least once to show that you are monitoring. All right, so this is for middle school only. This does not apply to EOC. For middle school, we're still tracking the time. So we know that there's a time limit of 4 hours for all 6 through 8 assessments. So for any student who does not complete the test within 3 hours, we're going to indicate by marking a 0 in the agency use field, and that's in column A. And we'll add that to the PowerPoint. And I think we show a picture of it later on, but we'll fix it on this slide as well. Time to test information need not be recorded for students who have an extra time accommodation. So if they're receiving extra time, we don't mark anything at all. Again, this is only for 7th graders, and then of course 6 through 8 later on in the year. In certain circumstances, it may be necessary to move students, whether you're moving students for consolidation purposes or you're moving students because they have extra time. Make sure that campus personnel Follow the testing procedures during this transition. Make sure that students are not carrying their own materials. It has to be done by a trained certified test administrator. And then once you get to your new location, make sure that you fill out another seating chart and that you put the new start and stop times recorded there, and that you're using the student tracking list. Teachers are allowed to read aloud or sign the writing prompt to any student who requests it. So if they request assistance, they can certainly read it. Reading or discussing student compositions, however, is not allowed at any time. At no time before, during, or after the test administration are test administrators permitted to assist students with their writing composition. Duh, right? This is called cheating. Compositions cannot be copied. Test administrators cannot elaborate on the prompt. They can't give students an opening or a closing sentence. They can't translate the prompt into another language. We can't help the students with an outline for their essay. Dictionaries should be provided for everyone. Of course, this go around, we're just doing English 1 and 2 and writing. However, you'll see there that we will provide dictionaries for all of those tests and for the reading test coming up later on in the year. So here are some types of dictionaries that are allowable. You could have a standard dictionary that's in English. If that's the most appropriate one for a student, you could have in a dictionary thesaurus combination. Bilingual dictionaries and ESL dictionaries, you could have these. However, these are only for EL students, and they have to be provided in accordance with the student's individual needs and if they use them routinely. While the students are working on the test, they're allowed to have access to the dictionary for the entire test. Dictionaries may be provided in a language that's most appropriate. Thesauruses are not required. However, if you have a dictionary thesaurus, as we saw on a previous slide, that's fine as well. They should be using the same type of dictionary that they routinely use in classroom work. And the dictionaries should be commercially produced. So it's not something that the school created. Should have a minimum TEA calls for 1 for every 5. Recommended is 1 for every 3, but of course we would love it if everybody had their own dictionary. All right, it's time to take a quiz. Debbie's going to give you a test, and she's going to grade you. Not really. She's not really going to grade you. All right, you could open your browser either on your phone or on your computer and go to joinmyquiz.com. In a minute, you're going to see a code that you will enter. So go ahead and go to joinmyquiz.com. Are we having problems, Debbie? You're on mute.
Oh, you can't hear me when I'm on mute? What the heck? Okay, joinmyquiz.com, and here's the game code. You can do it on your phone, your computer. Your name does appear on the screen, so just be aware.
Ted Cruz has joined us.
I just saw that.
Thought he was still in Cancun.
Oh, and Mr. Trump. Celebrity guest today.
Yes, we have a lot of dignitaries today.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started, even though not quite everybody's in. And everybody else can join us. It's kind of a fun one to get started. Ken, I'm a little concerned that they said the same thing as elementary. They'd rather wrestle a 6-foot alligator than call you. I don't know. Okay, AJ is in the lead. So for April STAAR administration, answers A and B were correct. Test can be given the first week online or on paper, and test can be given online the other weeks. Ooh, Biddy took the lead. All right, look at that. All that apply. Y'all did a great job on that one. I like the ones that say call Ken. Everyone should always call Ken. Biddy's still in the lead. Who do you think that is? All right, y'all did a great job on that one too. They have to be made available to all students taking the STAAR reading or writing test. So that means for English 1 and English 2, both portions of the English 1 and English 2. We're going to have some more questions in a little bit. So if you want, you can just go ahead and stay logged into it, and that'll make it faster in a little while.
Okay, before we
Did you want to
start,
let them have a break?
yeah, that's what I was just going to say. If we, before we start the online test administration section, we'll do a Q&A after that. But before we start that section, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So I am showing 2:08. So take 5 minutes, and at 13, be back on and ready to learn.
Did we lose Debbie in the PowerPoint? Oh no, here it comes. Okay, so I'm going to be talking with you guys about online test administration. And right off the bat, we're going to talk about some super important things. So all of you folks that are seasoned testing coordinators, please listen up because same things have changed in the online system that you really need to be aware of. This is super important. So obviously this year there's going to be more than one form of the test online. So previously, you know, it was all the same form, but now we have multiple forms online. So that is a big change. And because of that, if a student logs on and they begin testing and they have either, the language is really for elementary, but if they have a missing PMP or they have an incorrect PMP on there, the test is you're going to have to call us because the test has to be reset by ETS. And then you'll have to go into TAMS, put in the PMPs, and then print a new test ticket. And then the student will start the test over again. So it's going to erase any of their progress that they've made. Okay, so that's super important. You know, in years past, we would just go in and put in the PMP and then they just log back on and keep going, but that's not the case now. So that's a pretty big deal for a student if they are missing that. So even though you guys entered all of your accommodations in to our tool for ADQ and we registered those students with that, you still need to go in and verify that each student has the correct personal needs and preferences selected in the online system for this upcoming test. Okay, so super important. So these are some of the things you'll need to administer the online test. So obviously the test room roster and seating charts. Students, even though they're taking online, they still need 2 number 2 pencils with erasers and some scratch paper. They're going to need their student test ticket, headphones if they're receiving the text to speech. And also, if they are receiving the speech to text, they'll need the headset and dictionaries for these upcoming tests. So the writing and the reading. So if a student needs to take a break in the online test, it's really important for these kids just to pause their test. We don't want students to accidentally submit their test. If that does happen, please contact us. But students should push the pause button on their test if they need a break. And then when they need to resume it, they're just going to click resume and it will take them back to their test. Okay, so this online writing checklist We put it in here very big. It is online only, and it is only for students with embedded supports. Okay, so it's not for everyone, but it is required for students who are testing online with embedded supports. So it's a very smaller portion of students that receive this. It's not for paper students. It's not for anybody taking online, just online with embedded supports. Make sure you give it to them. So there are also some tutorials and practice questions in the online system, and we strongly recommend that students experience these things. So teachers also, or any of your test administrators should also experience these in the online system, especially if they're going to be giving the test, so that they're familiar if students have questions about the tools or what have you. So just think tutorials are the tools. So like highlighters, zooming in and out, colored overlays, those type of things, how to use the sticky notes, all that. And then the practice test, they really should practice in the test that they're about to take, because items are presented differently depending on the subject or content. So they should need to have practice, and they should not be doing it the day of the test. They need to do it prior to the test. There aren't any special test administration directions for that. And this is where you find it in the STAAR online system. It's just under practice. And then right below that, you see tutorials. And then for your kiddos that are virtual, there is an online browser where they can work in these as well to get that practice in. So when students go to submit their online test, it will be at the review end of the page. They'll click in test, and then there'll be a pop-up that says, I understand I cannot return to the test. And they're going to check that, and then they're going to select submit at the end. So that's how they submit their test. Students who cannot finish their test because they're ill or have an irregularity. Well, if they're ill and you think they're going to come back the next day, you should leave it open so they could potentially finish the next day. But if you know they're not going to return, or they have some type of irregularity, students should not submit the test, okay? They should just exit the test, and then you will go in and put in the proper score code for that, whether it's an O or whatever. So just make sure that you're aware of that. And then also, guys, make sure that your test administrators are really monitoring the students if they're taking online assessments, that they submit their test at the end of the time limit. Because if they don't submit their test, it's going to hang out there, and it's not going to submit until the very end of the window. Okay, so now we know that's what, like 4 or 5 weeks out. So make sure they get submitted. Okay, we're going to talk about accessibility features and designated supports next. So accessibility features are those things that are available to all students. So you don't have to fit in any special category. Anybody can get these things. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but there are things like reminders to stay on task, or just being in a small group if they need that. That's available to anyone. If they need scratch paper, if they need a colored overlay, anything like that, those are all things available to all students. Allowable accommodations, on the other hand, these are things that are prescribed to these students either through their 504 or ARD committee, or maybe an EL accommodation, or maybe something that a student is receiving through MTSS or RTI. And again, just so y'all know, when we say allowable accommodations, we kind of use that interchangeably with designated supports. Those are the same things. They should be marked on the answer document and in the online system, even if a student didn't use it on the day of the test. So what that means is if whatever committee, if they said a student gets this accommodation for this test, you're to provide it to them. And even if the student, like say they get a supplemental aid, even if the student never touches it and doesn't use it, you still have to mark that it was provided to them. So make sure that you're marking that on the answer document, and make sure you go in and mark that in the online system as well. And then this roster is required to be filled out with by grade or by content area with each student and what all they're receiving. And then the appropriate people giving that will sign off on it. If you have any locally approved designated supports that require ADQ approval, if you could please send those in. We need them at least 1 week prior to the testing date. Oh, that should say 2021, 2021. Anyway, so if you'll fill that out and send those in to us. There's also a new feature that's speech to text in the system. And again, this is not for everybody. This is only for students who meet the eligibility criteria for this. This would be given through like ART or 504 or something. So students who meet this are able to dictate their essay into this STAAR online system. And once this is enabled, then all the other supports will be disabled because this one's enabled. And if you do have kids that are going to get this, there is a new mini practice test available in the STAAR online testing platform for them to practice using it before they take the test with it. And we've put this out there before. There's a link to it on our website as well, but there is an online version of this for students to use during classroom instructions or what have you, so that they can become familiar with how this tool works. And that's the link for it there. For oral administration, we should all know that there are 2 levels of oral administration. So you can either get all of the test questions and answer choices read throughout the test, or you can have parts read at student request. So 2 different levels of support, and this is for paper testing. So in order to read all of the test questions and answer choices, the test administrator has to have a booklet to read from. So it's really important that the test administrator have the same form number of booklet as all the students that they're reading to. And then somebody who is just going to read parts at student request, they can have a booklet of the same form number if you have extras or you want them to have that. Otherwise, they can read over the shoulder of the student. And then this is just a little handy chart to show you what is allowable to be read and what is not by content area. The most important one down here is the writing right now. And this is probably the hardest one because there are very specific things that can be read and cannot be read. So make sure you go over this really well with your test administrators that will be giving oral administration. So for writing, the revising passages, questions and answers, any reference materials, and supplemental aids can be read, but editing passages and questions and answers cannot be read. So, during the last benchmark, we had a lot of folks call into our office and like, yeah, it stopped reading, what's wrong? And that's because they got to the editing passages. Okay. So the editing passages and questions cannot be read. So make sure that if your teachers are giving paper administration, that they understand this so we can try to curtail any possible incidences then with that going on. Also, a student with oral administration who's taken a pencil and paper test cannot be in the same room with kids who are not receiving an oral administration. So I think that's kind of a given, but we always have folks ask us. The teacher also must read the test questions and answer choices in the order in which they're presented. So, a lot of times, like in 7th grade, I think the composition comes first. Well, you can't just say, guys, we're going to skip that and move on. I mean, you have to do it in the order it's presented. And I know teachers sometimes teach it in different orders, or even with English 1 and English 2, they may have them answer all the questions first and then come back for the comp. But if you're giving this oral administration on paper, you can't pick and choose like that. You have to do it in the order it's presented. So also any test administrators conducting an oral administration must be aware that they're viewing secure content. So you don't want to be talking about it later on in the teacher's lounge or anything. And obviously we've said this a couple of times, but if you're doing a paper and pencil oral administration of any subject area, the test administrator and the student have to have the same form number. Now, if you put that in, when we ask you for that, when we did our registration, you should get Form 01s. But if for some reason you didn't, you're going to have to find forms of the tests that are the same in order to meet this requirement. And also additional training is very, very important for every test administrator who's going to give an oral administration. You have to have an additional training with them using the oral and signed administration guidelines, and also the PDF that's found in the DCCR. So you need to make sure that you go over this very, very carefully with your persons that are going to be giving this. And also don't forget to give this training to anybody that's going to be a reliever in these rooms. So if you have people assigned to go to these oral administration rooms to relieve folks, they need to have the same training as well, okay? Only students may perform calculations, solve problems, and respond to test items, and test administrators cannot. So make sure that your test administrators understand that they're not taking the test, okay? So they shouldn't be working problems or writing out what they would make their, composition about or anything like that. And lastly, about large print booklets. So student responses and compositions have to be transcribed onto an answer document according to the procedures outlined by TEA. So make sure that this happens. It can't be scored unless it is transcribed onto a scorable answer document. And there is a document titled General Instructions for Administering Braille in Large Print that they can use to guide them with that. We're going to talk a little bit about security now. And active monitoring, one of our favorite things. So a certified training testing person must be in the room at all times and be actively monitoring the room. So, we have a lot of folks doing online testing right now, which means the test administrator may have a main computer that they're running the session from. It's very important that they're actually running the session and not playing games or emailing or surfing the web or anything like that just because they have a computer in front of them. So make sure that they're still getting up and walking around and monitoring the students, and that they're not doing other things on the computer besides just monitoring the test. They're not to view or discuss individual test items or responses unless they're specifically directed to do so. They have to remind students to record all the responses on the answer document, remind students of the time remaining in the session, and they cannot plan or conduct any activities which may cause the student to reveal the contents of the test. So not what did you struggle with or any of those kind of things. So our test administrators must ensure that students are working in the subject area being administered that day. I mean, this really applies when there's more than one subject area in a booklet. Make sure that the responses are on the correct section of the answer document. They have to have access to allowable materials and remain seated during testing. Students shouldn't be up wandering around the room. And students who complete their assessment, you need to have a plan for them and be real clear about what happens with those students. Do they leave the testing room? Are they provided in instructional activities while others continue testing? Make sure that it's real clear on what needs to happen until the time is up. Oh, I'm frozen. That's not a good sign. Well, I think I lost y'all.
I can still hear you, but if
okay,
you
like my
see
whole,
us,
yeah, I couldn't see, and then everything was frozen.
okay, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going. I'm sorry.
So the principal and campus testing coordinator needs to check the rooms every day to make sure that they're active monitoring going on. So they're actively monitoring the active monitoring. And they're going to sign at least once a day on the seating chart when they go into the room. They can sign more if they want to, but at least once a day. But the CTC needs to be accessible to all the test administrators in case there's a problem. So they shouldn't be testing because then they wouldn't be accessible to all the others. Are you good now,
back,
Lisa?
Debbie?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, it was like it was weird. Okay, so we're going to talk about blank answer documents. So test administrators need to regularly remind students with paper administrations to record their responses on their answer documents. They need to alert students periodically of the time remaining in the test session. So students that haven't completed within the allotted time must submit what they've completed. And if a student fails to transfer their answers or comp from the test booklet or answer document, do not check the booklet. Just like Mr. Torres was saying earlier, never look in the booklet. So you can call us for guidance on that. So if a student is bubbling their answers or writing their comp and the time expires, or if a student begins to transcribe their answers onto the answer document from the test booklet and the time expires, you need to contact our office for guidance, okay? So have them go ahead and stop, put their pencil down, collect their stuff, and then you can contact us. So collecting the materials. So before a student leaves the testing environment, the test administrator should quickly scan their completed answer document to be sure that the student has recorded all their answers and their composition on the document. If the student has not done so and time still remains in the session, they should say, you have not recorded all of your responses on the answer document. Please go back and mark your answers on it now. And then they should hand back the testing materials so that the student can do that. It's important for them not to point out any missed or individually skipped test questions either. So just make this statement and give it back to them. They'll figure it out. So to help us out with our training, there are some web-based modules out there for your test administrators. These aren't mandatory, but we strongly recommend them, especially since none of us have done testing in quite a while now. So we've given you the links to 2 places where you can find these. There's some on active monitoring and how to distribute test materials and how to properly handle secure materials. And then there's some new ones on active monitoring and accommodations. So we highly suggest folks look at those. So our cell phone policy that we have has not changed for students or staff. So each student is going to be required to turn their cell phone or electronic device off and place it in an envelope. Or a Ziploc bag if you know, for COVID, if you want to put each cell phone in a separate Ziploc bag and have them write their name, whatever you want to do, and turn those into the test administrator so that they don't have them. And then the phone, it's really clear, I think, especially for secondary kids, they're so attached to their phones. Make sure that the test administrator communicates to the students when they'll be getting their phone back. I know kids start to freak out and they want their phone and they raise a big old hissy fit. So I think just telling them up front when they're going to get their phone back would help calm them down a little bit and have a plan for that. But any students that make or receive any phone calls or text messages will face disciplinary action, and they may not receive test results. So you need to be real clear about that with students. And then the same kind of thing applies to us and our test administrators and other staff involved in testing. So we're not going to use our cell phones or electronic devices. We're going to turn them off. I know some folks don't want to turn their device off. They just want to silence it, but I don't think anything's worse than a phone vibrating in like a metal desk or something. It's kind of disruptive. So make sure people do that. If we have any incidents, it will be something that departs from the test administration procedures as they are established in the test administration materials. It would be a testing irregularity. Sometimes we say that too. Each person participating in the testing program is directly responsible for immediately reporting any irregularity, violation, or suspected violation of test security or confidentiality to you, the testing coordinator, or to the district testing coordinator or our office. So please make sure folks understand that. You'll want to complete the online incident form that's found on our website. There is one out there. We ask that you do not investigate on your own. You don't have to be a detective. Just let us know all the details and we will tell you what we need you to do. In the description of events that you type up and the persons involved type up, we need to know what happened and how it occurred, what the sequence of the events are, and any information about the problem on how it was resolved or remedied. And make sure that folks type up their statements, no handwritten stuff, please. So certain types of incidents, if they're procedural or serious testing irregularities, must include a plan of action that's going to describe what steps you're going to take to prevent it in the future. So this plan of action should include, It should specifically address the type of irregularity, what specific steps are involved in your action plan, specific corrective actions, and then contain a timeline for implementation. So be prepared to do that if you have a procedural or serious irregularity. Oh, students cheating. Hopefully they don't do it, but for some reason they like to. If you suspect a student of cheating, you should contact our office immediately. And we will determine that a student has been involved in cheating on a state assessment. They're going to be required to invalidate the student's test by marking the code of O. And then we're going to complete the cheating form. That's also out on our website, and the code of O form too. Okay, so that's that. Mr. Torres talked earlier about emergencies and what to do if you have an emergency on your campus. So guys, always your safety, staff safety, and student safety is always a top priority. I know that sometimes we feel like testing is the most important thing in the world, but actually our lives are, I think. So make sure that you consider the safety of students and staff first. And so these would be things, you know, we practice for this stuff all the time. If you have a fire drill, or maybe there's a gas leak or active shooter, whatever those things are, we practice them quite often. So you'll carry out whatever your normal procedure is. If students are taking paper tests, they should leave their tests where they are and follow your school's normal procedures. If they are testing online, again, students shouldn't have to exit their test or any of that. They'll just leave the test and get up and follow the school's procedures. Test administrators, you need to make sure that if something does happen and you have to evacuate or get over into a corner or whatever you have to do, that test administrators closely monitor and make sure that no one's talking about the test as best they can. And campus coordinators, you guys, after the incident occurs and everything is settled back down, and if, you know, whatever outcome has happened, or when you get to a place where you're not in a panic, you need to contact student assessment as soon as possible. Okay. You don't have to be calling us, you know, as you're running out the door or anything. You'll handle the situation and then call us and let us know what happened. So if you have a kiddo that is refusing to test, we know that there's always some. So if they're bubbling randomly or refusing to take the test, the test administrator should try to contact some type of an authority figure, maybe to help encourage them to take the test seriously. Maybe it's a teacher that they have a good relationship with, or counselor, somebody that will help, you know, talk them into it, hopefully. You should always try to contact the parent, give the parent the opportunity to try to talk the student into taking it. But you should definitely contact the parent to let them know that the student is refusing and what the consequences of that are. And then you're going to document that refusal on the refusal to test documentation form. And in the end, you're going to score it with the score code of S. Okay, so just make sure that you handle it in that way. And you guys should know that some folks will be still coming out from our district on-site monitoring team and extra help folks. So there will be people from upper leadership that will come out to your campus, and they go through a checklist to make sure that active monitoring is occurring and there are nice, good procedures on your campus and that you're following all your P's and Q's. And you know, there's all kinds of things happening at your campus. One of the things I would recommend is to have your testing plan, whatever your testing plan is, that you type up for everybody. Have a copy of that, and maybe a copy of the map of the building where you're testing and the locations where you're testing, and just have that available at the front office. So when this person shows up, they have that information in case you're not able to walk the building with them, that at least they have all that stuff to walk with the principal or AP or whoever. Extra help staff, we're not real sure about those folks yet. You know, we have a lot going on out there, and a lot of those people who are usually our extra staff people are out at the campuses right now filling in. So we're unclear on exactly how that will work out, but we're only giving one assessment really at this go around. So hopefully you can work that out. Well, for high school too, but you know, 2 separate days. So am I done?
Well, Lisa, I know you
Yeah,
want
I
to
just wanna
keep
keep
going,
going.
but it's my turn. Okay, I'm gonna bring up.
Look, I would just.
You want to just keep going? Okay. All right.
Remember this, Debbie, for next time. Her section wasn't long enough.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So after testing, that's what you'll look like probably with the little kid like, "Ah." Okay. Some answer document changes. Remember that the 2021 STAAR booklets now contain 3 digits and the 2020 only contain 2 digits. So that means you're going to need to put a leading 0 in front of all the 2020 booklet numbers. So you can't leave one of them blank. It needs to be a leading 0. So if you have a form 21, it's now going to be 021. Everything has to be 3 digits. There is an extra field in the LEP field now. E5 has been added. For score codes, we have A for absent. If they're absent for the whole window, S for scored, and O for other. It seems like we keep getting more and more reasons to mark other, but students who are receiving remote instruction, who don't come to campus, as we heard, are going to be marked other as well. And that's if we can't get them in there during the entire 5 weeks to get tested. So for grades 6 through 8, we're still going to do time to test. And if they have the time to test, we're going to mark the O. If it's a remote student that refuses to come to campus, we're going to mark the O in the, 0, not O, in the D column. All right. So we ask you to make a list of your potential testers for week 2 through 5 that you're going to bring to check-in on week 1. So this is my list of kids that I need to get tested. So for ADQ, K through 12 school, Ken Torres was absent all week. He was scheduled to take a test on paper, but he didn't come the entire week. And so I'm going to mark his paper document absent. And then I'm going to add him to ETS so he can take an online test when he comes back week 2. I'm going to give him the online test. Lisa Gaines was absent all week, but she was scheduled to take an online test. So at the end of the window, if Lisa never shows up, I'm going to mark an A in the online system. Debbie Hamer was absent all week, but she's a virtual student. She's virtually a student. She's a virtual student. And she was scheduled to take the online test. So at the end of the window, if Debbie Hamer never shows up to test, even though you have begged and pleaded and made all kinds of effort, then we're going to mark an O and a 0 in the agency use field. We still have the new to Texas field that we're going to mark for any students who are new to Texas this school year. So if they were at the school or at Texas at this school year, and then they moved out of state, and then they moved back to Texas this same year, they're not new to Texas because they were already here once. So that's new to Texas this year. In the online system and on the paper, we're going to mark all of the accommodations. And if the accommodation isn't listed, then we're going to mark DS. So if it's not one of the ones listed, then it's designated support. Voided answer documents, you're going to separate all the voids from the scorables. You're going to separate the EOCs from the grade 7. You're going to ensure that all the voided answer documents are facing the same direction. Don't include any other materials with the voided materials. No paper clips, no sticky notes, and you're going to place a completed void answer document on the top of each stack of voided materials and put a band around them. The reason we have to do all of this is because the voids are actually scanned as well. So if we put extra sheets of paper in there, you know what happens, because it happens when we do our scanning here or you do your scanning there, then it jams up the scanner. So don't put anything else in the stack and make sure they're all facing the same direction. And please don't put blank answer documents. There's no reason to scan those. Those blank ones don't need to be with the voids. It's only ones that have pre-coded information or hand-gridded information. Class identification sheets, we're going to do one class identification sheet for each group. So if you're middle school, you're going to need one for grade 7 writing, and you're going to need one for English 1. The answer documents that are behind that class identification sheet should match the number that's bubbled on the class identification sheet. That seems like a duh, right? If you have any special situations like above grade level testers, separate them with a different class identification sheet. It'll make your life a lot easier when you come to check in. And place all your hand grids right below the class identification sheet. And then if you have absences, place them right below that. That way we are sure we get them all marked correctly. You're going to combine all of those class identification sheets into one campus and group identification sheet. And you're going to number the answer documents, or you're going to put the number on the campus ID sheet of all of those together. Boxes, we're going to return the materials in the original boxes. We can't get creative with the boxes. We're going to label each box with the school location number, separate them all by administration. So we're going to separate the 7th grade from the English 1. You're going to bring your boxes full of non-scorables to the warehouse. For those of you that don't know what non-scorables are, that's your booklets. You're going to take all of those to the warehouse. And you're going to do that immediately before or immediately after you check in here at ADQ. Your time that you sign up for is the time you're going to check in at ADQ. So just plan accordingly. If you get here and you have an extra hour, go ahead and take your materials over to the warehouse and get them scanned. If you come with 5 minutes to spare, go ahead and come here first. Your campus test status report. I have some good news about that. We still have a handout with directions on how to do it. And here's the steps right here, quickly written. And it's still a good idea to do it, but the wonderful women of student assessment are going to do it for you as well. So we're going to have that here for you when you come to check in. And hopefully it's going to make our life doing check-in a little bit easier. All right, Lisa went over this earlier, but we wanted to do it one more time. For those people that maybe were a little bit late coming back after the break, this is so important. If you have a test that's an online test and you don't mark all of the PMPs on it, you can no longer just stop the student testing, mark the PMP, and have them start testing again. You're going to have to call us. We're going to have to call ETS, and sometimes that takes a while. And then ETS is going to reset the test, and then you're going to have to go in on the online system and mark the PMP, and then you're going to have to print a new test ticket, and then the student is going to have to start over. So if they were on question 10, they're no longer on question 10, they're now on question 1. They lose all of the responses that they made. So please, let's check this ahead of time. If you go into the online system and look at your roster, it's listed right there on the roster what PMPs they have. If you print a test ticket, the PMPs are listed on the test ticket. So you might want to let your test administrators to know, hey, this is the list of PMPs the students should have. Make sure you check the the test ticket before you give it to the student to make sure the PMPs are there. It never hurts to have more than one person check. All right, for grade 7, you can check in on April 9th, or you can check in on April 12th. For English 1 and English 2, you can check in on April 12th, or you can check in on April 13th. You're going to bring your non-scorables to the warehouse, and you're going to bring your scorables here. When you take your non-scorables to the warehouse, you're going to get another opportunity to use iTrack at the warehouse, and you're going to scan all of your booklets back in at the warehouse. There'll be people there to help you, and you're going to make sure all of your booklets are accounted for before you leave the warehouse. Here's the list of what you're going to bring to check-in. And you notice in red, that list of week 2 through 5 potential testers. That's really important. If you don't bring that list for us, then you're going to have to sit here and write one for us. And you don't want to do that. Nobody wants to spend that kind of time with us. So make sure that you bring it before you come. We have a help session available for you March 8th through 12th at 9 and 2. They're small sessions. For those of you that came to the telepass, which is all of you because it became mandatory, but you know that it was helpful. I think almost everybody liked it and they got a lot of work done during it. This one is going to be voluntary. At least I think so. I don't know. Maybe Ken will make it mandatory too. But we will have an opportunity for you to walk through the online system with some help. And if you have questions about iTrack, we will also be here to help you about that. When you virtually come, you're going to bring a list of your students to test online. You don't need the language because they're all going to test in English, a list of the PMPs, a list of who you want to be administrators because you're going to have to give them rights, your test room rosters, and your master roster. Okay, we're going to finish up our quiz to see how you did. See who wins.
And Debbie, you're still buying the winner lunch like you did the elementary person who won?
I thought you said you were giving them a raise. Didn't you say the person that won got a raise? I'm so confused. Ooh, Biddy's still in the lead. Y'all need to come on and catch up with her. I think I just restarted the question. Hold on. I pushed restart instead of
you need to
next
review
start.
it anyway, Debbie.
Oh, I needed to review it. Biddy is still in the lead. Okay, so what portions can be read on the writing test? You were supposed to mark all that apply. So the reading passages cannot ever be read on the writing test. And for those of you that are confused about why reading passages are on the writing test, it's because English 1 and English 2 have reading passages there as well. So those can't ever be read. And the editing passages can't ever be read. Biddy's still in the lead. All right, good job. Okay, remember when we talked about accommodations, we said that an accommodation should be marked if it was provided. So if it doesn't matter that the student never used it, you're still going to have to mark it. And it has to be marked in the online system and on paper. Like some really good ideas here, Ken. I hope you have your checkbook ready. Ooh, a week off. I like that. Cancun, that one's good. A lot of people want a raise. That seems like a good answer.
Yeah, I see that. I'd probably go broke by all of these answers.
You guys did a great job.
Okay, we are at the end of our the STAR portion. We're going to do a quick Q&A and answer some of the questions that you might have. Monica, did you have the questions?
Yes, sir. Okay, first one is from middle school. Can we combine biology and 8th grade science test on the same day?
Hang on, I'm going to look at my calendar real quick. If that helps you somehow to rearrange your schedule, send me an email on what you plan on doing, and we can discuss that. That's on a school-by-school basis. I know you won't be giving English 2 on that day, but yeah, send me an email on what exactly you want to do, and I'll respond to you offline.
If a parent has said that they will not send their student, do we keep trying to test that student?
Yes. You should continue to ask. You know, for the English, it's a little different in that it's only going to be 1 day a week, unless, of course, they need both tests, in which case it'll be 2 days during the week. But the makeups are going to be just that 1 day. I would just continue asking up until the very end. That's what they want us to do, so that's what we will do. And finally, in the end, if they don't show up, then we mark them an O.
Next one, if a 504 or a SPED student does not take the test the first week, do they have to take the online test?
Yes.
Okay.
They have to do a makeup. So if they don't take it the first week, regardless of what they are, they can take it online with accommodations.
If locally supports were approved in December, are they still approved for April and May?
As long as it's for the same subject, yes. I'm assuming a high school person asked that. They used it in December. They can use it again in the spring as long as it's for the same subject, yes.
Will the revising and editing section be labeled in the test booklet?
Yes, it'll be labeled in the test booklet.
If teachers are monitoring online testers, will it show when the test was submitted?
Yes, it will show when tests are submitted. It shows the status in one of the columns.
What if an in-person student decided to go virtual and never comes back?
If an in-person student decides to go virtual, well, they're no longer an in-person student. They're now a virtual student, so we would treat them as a virtual student.
What do we need to check in if we are testing all online?
Paperwork, mainly all of the paperwork, seating charts, all of those things that you see on there, minus answer documents.
If an online student needs a new test ticket and has to start their test from question number 1, does their time start over?
Yes, you're referring to the situation where you may have had a student that had the wrong PMPs or didn't have the correct PMPs, and they had to start over. Yes, they would get their full allotted time back. So we would have to take note of what time it is before we restart them on the test.
Is there a new calculator policy?
No, it's the same calculator policy that was in place before.
And the last question is, I'll just make a statement. They asked where the handout's located, and it's located in the learning pathways. There's a link. That's it.
Yes, and then I want us to go ahead and take a quick break, but before we do so, I hate to harp on it. It feels like we're really harping on this, but I want to make sure that everybody understands very clearly on that slide that we put up with that's new for the PMPs. Again, I want to remind especially new folks, those PMPs that are in the system currently came from you. That's what you input into the online tool when we asked you to input your PMPs. So I say this to say, when you can, way before the test, go online and check those PMPs. Because if you wait right up until the time the test rolls around, there is a possibility you're going to print those test tickets and the students are going to have the wrong PMPs. Now, they also appear on the test ticket. So that's another way to verify. As you print your test tickets, if you have a helper, especially, would it be especially helpful to double check for you those PMPs as you're printing the test tickets, because that would be the time where you could go in and redo the PMPs, fix them how they need to be, and then reprint a test ticket for that student. Super, super important. Again, I hate to harp on it. We sound like a broken record, but this is totally, totally new to us. And if you don't fix those PMPs now, or before the test, I should say, then it's going to be very difficult after.
We did have one more question. If we have any new due dates for TELPAS?
We do have the due dates for TELPAS. I know originally I said they were going to come with a memo, but they did not. We will send those out separate, along with the new deadline for entering the composition scores for benchmark number 3 that was given back in February. I guess we're still in February. Other questions?
There's a question about whether we have a module on how to check PMPs, and if you go to TAMS to check PMPs. Yes, you go to TAMS to check PMPs, and I don't think have a module on how to check PMPs, but we do have the help sessions available, and we will show you how to do that during the help sessions.
And just as a reminder, if you did not enter PMPs into the online tool for whatever reason, it could have been that you didn't, just going to say it, you didn't know what you were doing and you didn't know what you were missing out on, you will have to go in and enter those PMPs in the system student by student. That's why we make the tool and set deadlines, because that file does get submitted to the state and then the PMPs get entered. If a PMP has changed because maybe the student had an ARD meeting and they added an accommodation or they took one away, those are easy fixes. You just go in the system and you either add it or take it away. But again, all of this has to be done before you print your test tickets, or else you're going to have to get rid of that test ticket, go in, fix it, print another one. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. The last section of our presentation